This video is brought to you by NordVPN. Get 75% off via the link below. With the recent release of Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled, today we'll be taking another look at some of the regional differences within the Crash Bandicoot series. Most games in the series have had many changes made for the Japanese versions, which is something Censored Gaming has covered in the past, and how this affected the first three mainline games on PlayStation 1. However, there's many more Crash games than that, and many more changes. The new Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled is a remake of Crash Team Racing, a spin-off kart racing game from 1999 that was both a big commercial and critical success across the world. The game's success includes the Japanese market, where it was also favourably received, and this is likely in part due to the amount of effort Naughty Dog poured into the Japanese releases of the series. As Censored Gaming has previously covered, the Japanese marketing and the games themselves received numerous alterations to try and make it appeal more to Japanese tastes. This led to many different things, such as the creation of the Crash Dance, a humorous dance that Crash performed in lots of Japanese marketing and then later even in the games themselves, and ultimately being carried forward to the Western releases as well. Crash's design was also seriously revamped so that he now looks cuter and less aggressive, with the developers explaining that this was felt as being more in line with Japanese preferences. As mentioned, like most games in the series, Crash Team Racing would also continue with this trend of tailoring the Japanese release more to Japanese audiences. Crash Team Racing was renamed over in Japan to Crash Bandicoot Racing, and as shown, the Japanese artwork was again altered so that Crash's design looks less aggressive and cuter. You can also find examples like this with things like the Japanese commercials. Over in the West, Crash was portrayed as wisecracking, tough and a little rude, like shown here, where he flirts with some women and then starts challenging an old lady to a race.
So, let's face the facts. I'm hot, you're hot. Who wants to pet me?
Crash Team Racing. Once he gets behind the wheel, things get ugly.
You and me. Booyah, Grandma. Booyah.
Japanese commercials, however, range from things like Crash being a lovable part of a family household, and then several somewhat stranger commercials revolving around an old grandfather reminiscing over Crash, and then Crash eventually making a grand return. As soon as you boot up the game, you can find some big differences between the Japanese and English versions. The title screen between the two versions is drastically different, with the English version showing an animation of Crash holding a trophy up, whilst in Japan he is driving it in his cart, with his visual design also changed to the Japanese design for Crash. Other visual changes were made to the character icons for races, where not just for Crash, but a number of the character icons were redrawn for the Japanese versions. This was likely again an attempt at trying to better appeal more to Japanese tastes, and as shown, changes include giving the characters bigger, more anime-like eyes. Another big change was made to the theme song. Whilst in the West, the theme was a new track that's somewhat similar to the one used in the first game, like other games, the Japanese version changes the theme, and this is into something much more up-tempo and with occasional vocals saying Crash's name. A few interesting changes were also made to make the game a bit more accessible for players. And the Japanese version of the game, tracks now have a difficulty ranking in the bottom right of the screen, indicated by fruit icons. This is something that was completely absent in the West. Also in the Japanese version is a turbo counter during races that pops up at the top right when you chain 3 or more turbos. This was however only available in the West via a cheat code, and was likely made available by default in Japan to try and encourage and help teach players about the turbo system. Similar changes to ease of understanding and accessibility have been seen in the other games. For example, in the previous mainline games, Aku Aku would give hints to players whenever the mask item was picked up, and this was completely exclusive to the Japanese versions. Some other changes were made to the game for translation reasons. The TNT crates, for example, no longer say TNT on them, but instead display a symbol of a bomb. The Nitro crates were also tweaked in Japan, with them being translated into Japanese and reading Nitro like in English. During the intro, the book that controller is reading is no longer titled How to Drive either, but it's been changed to the Japanese word for simply vehicles. Also, due to the title change in Japan from Crash Team Racing to Crash Bandicoot Racing, all instances of the acronym CTR were changed, with the flag at the start of races being changed to Japanese writing that reads Racing, for instance, and the CTR items were altered to the letters C, B and R. A curious change was also made to the adventure mode School Rock Crystal Challenge, which now needs 2 boss keys to unlock rather than just 1. The unlockable scrapbook, which shows a wide range of photos from the making of the franchise, is also a little different between versions. While some exist in the English versions too, over in Japan there are even more shots showing the Japanese side of development and the Japanese version of Crash. A part of the montage also uses the Japanese version of the theme song, unlike over in the West where the Japanese theme is never heard. An especially strange change can also be found made to the trophy girls who hand out trophies to the winners of races. In the English versions, all of them have a theme of having different coloured hair and eyes. In the Japanese versions though, for some reason all of the girls now have brown eyes instead, with first up being Isabella, then Amy, then Megumi, and then finally Liz, who was curiously also given the longer name Elizabeth in the Japanese version. It's possible that this wasn't an intentional change though, as during the ending's epilogue, all of the girls have the same colour of eyes as the English versions. Also, for a bit of behind the scenes trivia about Megumi, the character was actually named after the product manager and marketing manager for Sony Computer Entertainment Japan for the first 3 Crash games. It was the real life Megumi who created the Crash dance for Crash 1's TV ads in Japan, and this is also why the character speaks with a Japanese accent in the new remake version of the game. Speaking of Japanese accents, the Japanese version of the game was fully dubbed, and so whenever you can hear voices in the English versions of the game, the Japanese version is dubbed accordingly. You can hear this, for example, when you first boot up the game during the pre-title opening cinematic.
Sony Computer Entertainment! Yay! Engine start! Seat belt をしっかり締めて Naughty Dog!
And then for a few comparisons actually in-game, here's a section of the English story intro.
Get ready to race for the fate of your planet!
And then in the Japanese version.
俺様ちゃんのそんな気がするのださっさとレースを始めて代表を決めろ
And then finally some brief comparisons of the voice acting during gameplay.
Here you go!
Take that! Sorry! 何をするの勝つのはわしだ
Whilst not being released in Japan yet, the new Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled has been shown to again have a very different design for Crash on the box art. As for any changes made in-game, this is something that Censored Gaming will look into when it's released. In the Trilogy remake though, the Japanese version was kept very close to the English, and so it's possible that this will be the same for Crash Team Racing. But jumping back to the original game, some of the game's cheat codes will also change for the Japanese version. For example, to access the Spyro 2 demo, you now have to hold a specific button combination whilst booting up the game, rather than entering a code in the main menu. It's also worth pointing out that the Japanese Spyro 2 demo is off the Japanese version and is fully translated and dubbed into Japanese. On that note, there also exists an exclusive code to the Japanese version that again is activated by holding a series of buttons whilst booting up the game. If done correctly, players can see a wacky bonus video showing an actor wearing the Japanese Crash costume and getting into his usual antics. This only exists in the Japanese version of the game, and so for the curious, here it is, and until next time, thank you for watching.